From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN Noon News.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on the Noon News. I'm Augusta McDonnell. The jury in the Manhattan criminal trial of Donald Trump deliberated less than 12 hours over 2 days before finding the former president guilty on 34 felony counts. Trump stood accused of falsifying records to cover up an alleged sexual encounter with adult film star Stormy Daniels. The judge set Trump's sentencing for July 11th. He faces up to 4 years in prison, but could be given probation with no prison time. We talked to MSU Billings political science professor Paul Pope about how this verdict will impact Trump's run for the White House. He says he doesn't expect it to have much of an impact at all. Pope tells us supporters will likely continue to back Trump's candidacy. He also expects the former president to win Montana.
Trump in 2020 did very well in Montana. Montana tends to leave pretty conservative. I don't know that there will be a huge shift.
Multiple federal and New York law enforcement officials tell CBS News there have been no changes in security surrounding President Biden or former President Trump since the historic verdict was announced.
Happy Friday, everybody, and TGIF boom as we cruise on into the weekend. Hopefully the weather will cooperate. Our local forecast coming up here in just a bit. But first, what's going on across the U.S. today? Your 48s, much of the U.S. mainly quiet today. Southwest, far southern Texas, we are looking at that heat risk continuing. Midsection of the U.S., severe weather potential today through the weekend. For us, we're warming up. High pressure dominating, keeping us mainly dry. Still have a chance to see some rain over on the eastern side of the state. Will we see any rain this week? Forecast coming up.
And now a story that captured the attention of the nation from our part of the world. Chad Daybell was found guilty on Thursday of first-degree murder and conspiracy charges in the deaths of his first wife and the 2 children of his second wife. It was a case Idaho prosecutors claim was fueled by power, sex, money, and apocalyptic spiritual beliefs. Daybell could face the death penalty. Scripps News' Kelly Craft with Court TV has the latest.
Chad Daybell, the self-proclaimed doomsday prophet, guilty on all counts, including the most serious charges of first-degree murder. Chad Daybell showed no emotion as the guilty verdict was read inside the Boise, Idaho courtroom. Jurors deliberated for nearly 6 hours and determined that Chad Daybell murdered his first wife, Tammy Daybell, and the 2 children, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, who belonged to his second wife, Lori Vallow Daybell. Here's some reaction immediately after the guilty verdict was read. We just heard the verdict for Chad Daybell, guilty on all counts. Megan, what is your reaction?
Overjoyed, relieved, happy, sad, good sad. Just all over relieved.
You and I were not sitting too far apart from one another inside the courtroom.
Nope.
Tell me about your feelings right before that verdict was read on count 1.
Very, very nervous. Like I said, there's always that chance, and so you kind of have that in your gut feeling that you're like, what if the decision doesn't get made right? But at the same time, I was just ready to hear it. I was ready to hear it. And
then after we heard that guilty verdict on count 1, which was conspiracy to commit first-degree murder for Tylee Ryan, then what did you think?
Relief. It just kind of, that feeling that you get that weight lifted off your shoulders, it's just, you feel like you can breathe again.
The state of Idaho is pursuing the death penalty in this case. That phase of the trial resumes Friday. Kelly Craft, Court TV.
And in more court news today, a woman who fired a gun inside Billings Clinic back in 2022 is going to prison. 38-year-old Panda Aradia shot herself in the ER. She was behind bars yesterday. This following her conviction on felony charges of criminal endangerment and assault with a weapon. Aradia will serve the term at the Montana Women's Prison. Her defense attorney had argued for a lesser sentence with no prison stay. And an arrest warrant has been issued for a Helena addiction counselor charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of possessing dangerous drugs. Marvin Coleman of Coleman Community Services is accused of having an inappropriate relationship with a woman receiving counseling services. According to court documents, the woman says Coleman groped her and she received money from Coleman for fentanyl. The Missouri River Drug Task Force began investigating the alleged assault and relationship in November of 2023. The arrest warrant and criminal charges were filed about a week after the Department of Labor and Industry filed suit against Coleman's business. They're seeking more than $50,000 in back pay and penalties to an employee. Coleman has been featured in stories on MTN in 2016, 2020, and 2023, where he spoke about addiction and recovery. And out of Helena, the lawsuit challenging Montana's ban on TikTok is now officially on hold. That case is going to have to wait until courts rule on the federal law that deals with that app. The Montana legislature passed SB 419, a ban on TikTok, during the 2023 legislative session. Lawmakers citing concerns that the app would expose Montana users' personal data to China. Plaintiffs sued, saying the law violated free expression rights. The federal district court sided with them and issued a preliminary injunction blocking the ban. With the case stayed, the injunction remains in place, so SB 419 will not be enforced. Once the national case is decided, the parties in the Montana case will have 30 days to file a suit to go from there. The PACT Act provides medical having to do with respiratory issues. The Veterans Administration announced this week that it's received 1.6 million claims, and more than 1 million veterans and survivors are currently receiving PACT Act benefits for issues like burn pits and Agent Orange in Vietnam. Senator Jon Tester was a major sponsor of the act. He told MTN that some of those who were opposed to the legislation were opposed because of what it would cost. He says he understood that concern, but adds the cost should have been accounted for before we ever sent any of those men and women into harm's way.
Appreciate the fact that that people are concerned about how much money it costs, because it is a problem. But the fact is this, Chet, and I've told you this before, if you're not going to take care of our veterans when they come back home after they serve this country in places like Afghanistan or anywhere in the world, then we shouldn't send them to begin with. And so the time to have the argument over whether we're going to spend the money or not isn't after the fact, it's before we send them off.
Senator Tester says hundreds of veterans were in the streets outside the Capitol during the vote and asking them how they would vote. He says that effort is what ultimately pushed the passage of that bill over the top. The past Attorney General Austin Knudsen and his opponent in the Republican primary are asking the state's top political cop to dismiss campaign complaints that accuse them of improperly coordinating their campaigns. The executive director of the Montana Democratic Party argues that Logan Olson, the other GOP primary candidate for Attorney General, wasn't qualified to be Attorney General and wasn't a legitimate candidate. She says Knudsen was improperly using him to raise more campaign funds. The Daily Montanan previously reported Knudsen was recorded saying he had recruited Olson to run against him. A Knudsen campaign advisor said in a response to the commissioner that the complaint didn't allege any specific violations. Olson also responded, saying he did have the 5 years experience required to be Attorney General, including time practicing law as a student.